Because I think sometimes we're scared of fulfilling that potential. We always, or at least for me, you always end up doing just less than you really know you can do, because maybe you don't know how you'll feel if you actually achieve those big dreams.
Hello, my name is Eline Perez and you're listening to Are You an Artist? Today's episode is with Matthew Aijuka, who speaks about being a scientist, climate change, travel, and big dreams. Spoiler alert, we also mention the Bible, Nelson Mandela, and Quimper's library. Matthew's life is fascinating, so enjoy the ride. I'm just going to compliment you the whole time.
Well, I'll take it.
Good. Are you ready?
Ready.
Ready?
Let's go.
Let's go. I always start the podcast by reading out a letter I've written to the guest.
Yes.
Dear Matthew, I remember meeting you in 2019 in a bus on the road to Quimper. We started to talk and I realized that your life was fascinating. You come from Uganda, you did a PhD in South Africa and in the US before coming to France to work in biology without even speaking French. I also remember a dream you had and you shared with me to open a library maybe in Uganda and help young people accessing books and computers. I find you extremely brave and inspiring. You also are very curious about life. And this podcast is called Are You an Artist? So, Matthew, are you an artist?
Well, thank you for that. You reminded me of, I'd probably forgotten about the library, but
I was curious about this.
I think it's definitely something at the back of my mind, and it will eventually do it. So I think I am. To be fair, I think if I wasn't a scientist, I would definitely be a writer. I used to write stories when I was younger.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, mostly some romantic stories. If you're, yeah. So I love literature. I love art, expression, culture, travel, geography. So I think deep down, I would definitely be. I am an artist. Yes.
And what's your first creative memory?
Let me see.
Or do you remember your first story that you wrote?
Well, so I think the story itself, the writing was not something I really did out of passion. It was out of passion, but I don't think it was something I initiated. So in Uganda, when you study English in the secondary school, there's what they call the O-levels, which you're probably familiar with living in London. During the O-levels, you do a lot of subjects, and part of the art subjects you do is English, because they want you to really learn a good command of English. So you do English in three parts. You do English grammar, you do English comprehension, and then you also do English composition. And English composition is actually usually the hardest, because you're supposed to write something, and you're supposed to write about anything. But in your writing, you're supposed to use figures of speech. So instead of saying, I went down the road to see my friends, you'd say, I strolled down the path on the way to. So you have to be creative, because that's what gets you marks. So you use English, which would be very vivid, but not usually used in normal day-to-day language. So I found out that I wrote better when I wrote romantic stories, and whether it was describing a girl or describing a love or describing emotions. And I realized I had an unknown passion for that. And I did it because you do it for about 3-4 years. You do composition. And once I moved into the sciences, I kind of reduced that. But I was always, I'm a big fan of good writing. And I always read a lot of the big, nice news publications like the New York Times, the Atlantic, the Financial Times.
So not only love stories.
Yeah, so I was great at love stories. Everything else, I was not very good because I tried writing adventure and my marks went down. So, yeah, so I think it's also about, because you're very raw at the beginning and sometimes you find that you're good at something, but I think I didn't challenge myself more. And after the O levels, I left the arts. But I think if I had continued, I would have developed the skill of writing in different ways. Because I think if you're going to write well, as I've noticed with the good writers, you challenge yourself, and then you usually copy someone. And then eventually, as you mature into yourself, but it takes a lot of practice, which I didn't do. But I think I've always told myself I'll get back into the writing. Yeah.
And when you were super young, did you have an idea of your dream job?
Yeah. So I think when I look back, I think we all wanted to be engineers, doctors, but that's because that's what we saw. But I will say one thing I wanted to be was a bird when I was very young, because in the evenings in Uganda, and I think it's everywhere, you see the birds soar up in the sky and move, and you see them go. And I always wanted to be able to have that freedom to move. So if there's anything, at least I remember, which was myself, not influenced by anyone else, I think the ability to have freedom and move to different places was something I remember as a young child. I was very keen to experience. Yeah.
And were you able to travel a little bit?
So when I was younger, not really, because Uganda so I was born in the 80s, of course. And in the 90s is when really we grew up. I did actually travel, funny enough. I moved to the States with my mom took me to the States because she was studying in Florida at the time. So she started actually a PhD. And then for the last 2 years of her PhD, she took me over.
So your mom did the PhD as well?
She did. She was a lecturer at the local university in Uganda. So I guess I followed in her footsteps without knowing. But I did have a chance to travel. And I think this was a time when there wasn't a lot of travel in the early 90s. So I was in the States from 92 to 94. And I think when I was young, I experienced a new world. And I think it stayed with me. The bug stayed with me. And my mom was always very big on travel. I think she was not big on many things like toys or fancy things. But if she could help you travel, she would take you somewhere. I think that was something she was very keen on, because when she was younger, one of her lecturers told her that, there's some things school will never teach you. And if it means going on a school trip to another country, you go on the school trip for another country, because especially when a child is young, 1 + 1 is always going to be 2, There's nothing much they're missing over a few days of missing school. But what they learn on that trip outside the environment is something you can never teach in a classroom. So travel was always big on.
And do you have a strong memory of your arrival to the US at that time?
Yes. So, yes, it was a very interesting. Yeah. I not very strong, but America was nice in the sense that it opened up another world, whether it was sports, whether it was technology.
Of course, because then you went to school there.
Yes, I also went.
So you really experienced.
I did. But school was actually difficult, for some reason, because, of course, my command of English was not the best at the time. And I was the African. So I was a bit bullied. In fact, I was not severely, but I was bullied, and I was struggling in school for some reason. So the experience was nice from a cultural perspective, but I think the environment was probably not the best for me.
And when did you start to become interested in science as well?
So, of course, my mom, as I said, was a scientist. She was a soil scientist, an agriculturist. It was always with me. She was always big on education and things like that. But I think when we came back to Uganda, I went a class behind. So I guess that kind of maybe helped me settle in better.
Okay.
It meant that I lost time, but I think I also gained time in the sense of not being under pressure to perform. But I think it only after 2 years, I started feeling bad for not doing well. You know, and I don't know how it happened. I remember I had a report card come in, and my position, because they used to count us in positions, right?
Yes.
So from the first to, and we were many in a class. I mean, we were usually 100 in a class. You can imagine.
Oh wow.
Oh yeah, it was very big. So I think I was the 12th, you know, or 20th, one of the two, and I was actually pretty sad about it, and I don't know where that came from.
Because you used to be at the top.
No, I was never at the top, funny enough. As I told you, I was not really. But for that year, I think something in me was like, maybe you can do better. And from that time on, I wanted to be at the top. I never became ever at the top all through my school, but I wanted to be among the top performers. And again, at the time, I wasn't, because still primary school, I was more into just normal education. It's not until I think I reached my O levels, which is lower secondary school, that I started loving the sciences, you know. And maybe it was really my mom's influence, to be honest. If it was up to me, I probably would have been a writer or a journalist, one of the two.
And when you do research, or even when you did your PhD, what's the feeling driving it?
Okay, so of course I do high school, finish that in Uganda. Then I go to university in Uganda, do my undergraduate. And when I was finishing my undergraduate, in the last year, what you do, you actually major.
Okay.
In a particular. So I majored in microbiology, which was pretty exciting, you know, because you work with bugs, but mostly because I was working. Yeah.
Super exciting.
Yeah, super exciting, because they're not things you see with your eyes. You know, it's only when you use a microscope.
And it kind of touches everybody in a way.
It does, right? But what's very interesting is that in my third year of undergraduate, there's a guy who came in who was doing his PhD actually. And my supervisor was also his supervisor. And he was looking for people, assistants, to help him do this project. And because they thought I spoke one of the local languages where they wanted to go do the research. So we're researching about a local fermented drink, you know. And I ended up joining the project. And because he was coming from Norway, heavily funded, he had a lot of equipment, science. We jumped onto his projects, and it really opened up a new world. I was like, oh, this is very exciting, because he had very nice equipment in the lab, you know, at the time. So this opened up a big world for me. I was like, okay, maybe I could do this, you know. And that's really how it grew. And after that, I eventually decided to do a master's, because I wanted to leave my country. I mean, I felt that I needed to get out there, you know, explore the world. Then my auntie helped me get to South Africa, do my master's at a good university there. And once I got in there and I understood what I was supposed to do, I loved it, because it was, you're learning a lot of things. You're very independent. And yeah, my love for research totally blew. Yeah. And then my supervisor at the time, even before I finished, for some reason thought I could do my PhD. She was like, if you want to do your PhD, I'll give you money. I was like, oh, why not? Which in hindsight was not a good idea, because she actually kind of hijacked me, because I should have just done my master's and left South Africa. Yeah, because I could have moved to Europe or America and had even, you know, a bigger experience earlier on than later on. I mean, I don't regret my experience in South Africa, but I think I probably spent too long there in terms of because the funding was not the best. Although as an African, I think it helped me understand Africa better.
Okay.
Because in South Africa, there are a lot of people from other African nations, and you get this very African feel. So I think that was nice from a cultural perspective. Yeah.
And how do ideas come to you? Desires, inspirations?
I think it's people. I think when you read about people, I left high school in 2004. And remember, this was the start of real social media with Facebook. It hadn't yet spread, of course, around the world, but you could see what was out there in the world, whether it was through the mail or Yahoo News. And social media was changing so much that now you could learn about new people, celebrities, old people, books were more available. So I would say there were multiple things that were led to, but a lot of it was inspiration from books, from people.
Do you have like some key books that really marked you?
Yeah. So when I was younger, because I mean, most African people grew up with religious teachings. So the Bible was a big part when I was younger. And I always liked the more practical teachings, like some of the books of Paul's teachings. There are parts which are very kind of metaphysical, where it's miracles and things like that, things you can't really. But then there are some, especially with the New Testament, where there's a lot of teachings, just normal teachings. So the writing in that sense was quite inspirational at the young age, because you don't have access like in France here, which I really love about France, is that the public libraries, the access to the public libraries is impeccable. So at a very young age, you're reading a lot of books. But more recently, I would say a lot of the changes I've had, at least from an ideological point of view, came during when I was doing my master's and PhD. I think reading Steve Jobs' book about life, his biography was very nice. Reading, there's a book called This is Biology also, which talks about biology at its core. What is it about? I read a very inspirational book with quotes from Nelson Mandela, throughout his life and his struggles. Actually, non-fiction has had a very big impact on me, because I think I like to follow people's lives and the contrasts in their lives. That even if they're great, you can still be a great businessman or a great scientist, but also fail in some personal... And which is good, because you stop putting people on a pedestal. You take the good and you try to learn and learn that, I mean, depending on what you want success to be, you can't win sometimes in all areas, so you have to choose.
I see these days, I see a lot of really successful people in their career, but then sentimental life is very difficult.
I think what's the big issue now is really how do we solve climate change? That, I mean, we can talk about, we built this, we built that, but then for what? Are we building it so that we can end up, all dead, because this is a very, very big issue. And I think that anyone who's not trying to see how they solve the issue is really living in a cave. I mean, even if we talk about taking people in space, even today we have tried to take, planes, are probably everywhere, but not everyone can afford to take a plane flight, So how are we going to move everyone from the Earth to wherever else people want us to go? I've started kind of reflecting on what for me would be success, The success in your personal life, yes, but then how do we make sure that we also impact our communities?
That's what you told me earlier, also about thinking about helping refugees.
Yes. I think we need to have, and I feel that a lot of people who are great impact more than themselves and their immediate families. I mean, that you should do. You should help your children, and you should help, but what are you doing beyond that? Now, and I think especially regarding climate change, what are you doing to make sure that we don't burn ourselves to death, Yeah.
And when did it start to really become something for you to think about this community working?
Well, to be fair, I think if you're from Africa, it's a community.
Exactly.
It's
It's completely different approach, right?
Yeah. I was raised by a single mom. So meaning that I was raised a lot of times by people in my maternal family. Mm-hmm. So my uncles, my aunties, my mom's friends were always are very important to have in my life. So when I go back home, they're people I have to see, not because I just want to see them, but because they have been they either helped somewhere, maybe take me to school somewhere, or help my mom, give my mom a loan, or when my mom was not around, they came, looked after me. So we live in a very communal society. It's changing now, but to a large extent, that's why things like funerals are very important. If someone dies, a big community comes. When people get married, a big community comes. So when you talk about family, it's not just you and your wife and kids. No, it's everyone. Yeah. Because we don't have health security, health insurance. So when you're sick, someone from the family is going to come and look after you, or when you die, someone, some people are going to come and contribute to your funeral because you do not have life insurance. So for us, it's part and parcel. The community is part of you. So when things like climate change are talked about, we understand the impact. Sometimes it weighs people down, especially if you're one person with resources among many who don't have. But I think it's also sometimes people look at it as a call of duty. So these things have always been with us. But I think now that I've been outside my country for a long time, I know about the science. I know about the effects, we can see now in the South, it's winter, but it's pretty warm, right?
Yes.
And that affects a lot of things, the biodiversity, the production, food agriculture production chain. It affects things we don't see, and we don't know how long this can happen, So we might have a much longer summer, and that affects things, and then maybe we might have floods later on. So that creates a lot of, disturbances. So you see the scientific, but also the physical effects. Mm-hmm. And it's very easy to relate to because at least from a lot of our cultural background, we believe in interconnectedness, not just in people, but also our environment. Although sometimes we don't understand why. But now with the scientific background, we understand that, there's much more connection than we... So it was always with me, but it's just been awakened, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I feel like still France and maybe the US as well, it feels like a very, places based on individuals. And because you did these long studies and everything, did you feel like you were working on your own, or did you always feel like you were working with people?
Well, you see, that's the beauty about research. Research, you have to work with people.
Yeah.
Because, research is collaborative. Even just to go to the US, I needed a professor to fund it. I needed to apply to grants for my university to fund it. I needed to work with colleagues in the lab to teach me the methods or to help me do work. And that's why I loved research, as much as it can be a very hard place sometimes, because especially from a monetary perspective. But from a human perspective, it's very enriching because it shows you that you can do a lot with little, but also, you meet so many different people, different countries, different backgrounds, you've all come to, discover all these great things. So from that perspective, you marvel, and it's very easy to travel because once people realize you're scientists, the borders open, unlike as we're talking about recently about refugees, where people are actually coming because they want to live a better life, or they're fleeing, but they can't come in because they don't have the right people to connect them. Yet, if you're coming to study, you could go to some of the most restricted countries to come in, like Japan. It's not very easy to get into Japan if you want to go there illegally. But you can get in there as a researcher, and you don't need a lot of money to get there, especially if you have backing, because most people work on backing. Back to your question, yes. Each country, I think, has its individual things. And I think I'm learning to love everything. You love your Ugandan aspects which you value. You love the things you learned from South Africa. You learn the things you learned from the United States. I also stayed a bit in Ireland.
I forgot about
things
that.
in Ireland. Because each country, there's a reason why it's successful, and it has the things we love about them, and then maybe the things we probably don't like so much. And of course, France, so you learn, okay, what is it that I can learn from this country, and you take it with you, and it's yours, And it's also something I'm learning, that it's okay to call that home too. Home is in the heart. You can choose where you feel home, No one, people can say, yeah, that's not your home, but they can't tell you how you feel.
Exactly.
And you need to own that and say, that is your opinion. This is how I feel, and that's how I'm going to take. So I think I'm at that stage where I'm okay to say I am Ugandan. I was born in Uganda, love it to death. But I can also say South Africa is home. I can also say the United States is home. I can also say Ireland is home. I can also say France is home, because all these countries, whether it's a short time or a long time, I've lived in them. They have provided value for me. I've met some great people there who have enriched me. And you who's out there, you don't know that experience. You can't take it from me. And in a very polarized world, I think, and remember also, especially for us Africans who face a lot of discrimination outside Africa, okay, we also face a lot of it back home, right? So when you look back, you're like, oh man, in my own family I faced this, in my own community I faced this. So why am I surprised if I meet a few people who are going out, even if there are many, in a country which is foreign to me in many ways? Why am I surprised, Some of the reasons we leave home is because the opportunities have kind of dwindled. So why am I so hard on the guy who gets angry at me at the bakery or in the shop, and I forget that my own family member did this to me, So I think sometimes we're a bit too hard on the countries that host us, because people fear difference, but I think once we calm their fears and say, oh, no, man, I'm actually here to provide value, I think we can meet some very great experiences. Yeah.
And when you do research, how can you explore your creativity?
That's something I'm actually working on right now, where I think, first of all, you have to understand what is good work in your own research, in whatever you're trying to do. And then from there, see how you can enrich, because the biggest thing in a lot of these estab is there are ways things are done, in quotes. So people do things a certain way because that's how it's always been done. So changing how we present the information, or how we communicate the information, or how we even collect the information, usually has a set way of rules. So I think creativity for me would be how we infuse and say, okay, maybe, you know what, when I was at a play, or when I was at a gallery, or when I was listening to a concert, or when I was reading a newspaper, something was presented in this way. How can I present it in a more engaging way, in a more vivid way? How can I use other fields? Because usually what happens is that people borrow from different fields.
Yeah.
And I think that's something I say I would try to do. But it also takes really understanding what you want to do, and understanding the community of people so that you don't alienate them. Because the whole goal is to keep these people but engage them better and show them a different way, rather than try to totally, disenfranchise them. You want them to see you as partners, and you're providing a different way of doing something, and hopefully a better way.
In a unique way.
Yeah, a unique way. Not even a better way, because you don't want to seem like it's better, but you want to say maybe, how about we do it like this?
Yeah.
But that takes, I think, being able to see broadly, because what happens, especially at our level, when you do a PhD, you focus so much on something.
And it's so small also.
Yes. It's so big but so small.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Brain explosion.
So you're being able to step back and say, okay, because at the end of the day, for many people to take in your information, it has to be broad. It can't be super specific, although in science, even in the arts, you try and focus on a specific, because that's the only way you can make sure that you don't have too many variables, But at the same time, you're supposed to be able to, communicate how this very specific thing might have a much more, why should other people care? And that's always, I think, sometimes we try to oversell, but if something is valuable and we communicate it to people, they'll try to understand it.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And what types of artwork interest you?
Art?
Yeah.
Okay. So, what's funny is that's something I've not really explored so much as now I'm in France and Europe,
But even now you were speaking about like cinema and things that inspired you to present.
So nature. I think now I'm more inspired by nature, I'll say. Nature. Because when I went back to Uganda in December and early January, I know it's lush, it's green, it's but I got a big appreciation for it, whether it's the leaves or the fruit, or the grass, or
What fruits do you eat there?
So it's a lot of tropical fruits. So you have bananas, you have mangoes, you have pineapple,
colors.
Yeah, you have
Textures also.
Yes, I think sometimes we are blinded by the so-called poverty, which honestly is not really poverty, because we have the natural resources.
Yeah.
I mean, we might not have the tram systems and the trains and the airports, but we have the nature, and that's what matters. And actually, I was thinking about it today, this evening, where in a world where we're losing a lot of natural resources, we need to actually communicate how do we protect what we have now, because we're losing a lot of it around the world.
Yeah.
So I think nature, definitely. Nature is something now which inspires me most, to be honest. Being out there, looking at the whether it's the grass or the lakes or the sea. I think now also stories. Stories about people and people's struggles. I was on Sunday. I was listening to a civil rights leader in America he was called James Baldwin. He actually lived in France for some time. He was African American who faced a lot of discrimination, and his goal was to kind of tell America that it needed to be better to the descendants of slaves. That they have not really benefited from the grand American story compared even to very recent immigrants. So I'm very inspired by this kind of because they talk about social struggles and the imperfect world we live in. And I guess that's why I'm trying also to ask myself, what more can I do for social issues, whether it's cultural diversity, whether it's economic opportunity, whether it's immigration, whether it's education. For instance, when I was telling you just a while ago how I was in Paris. So one of the big things is that I was able to visit the BNF library, this grand libraries in Paris, which is open to everyone, and the access to the archives and the open spaces. I mean, I worked there for some time during my time in Paris, but you could see all these young people coming in. Just that you have this very, very, very great institution, but it's accessible to the public, tearing down these barriers to knowledge access, So I think these are things for me which inspire me a lot, because even if your parents can't buy you that book, you can still go and read, these great books. You can still go and have, free Wi-Fi, but also in a very, 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 very nice environment. But then also, it's a social place for where you might meet some great minds, because you have young, old, that's one of so many other places. I was in Quimper. They have a great library. I think when I was in that library, that was one of the great libraries I met in Quimper. You can imagine a very well renovated mediatheque, where there's not only books, there's videos, there's for the young kids, the old people. So it's not just art in the sense of, oh, this looks beautiful. Actually, that doesn't inspire me so much. But what inspires me more is what is already there naturally, but also the stories about people and their struggles. I think I relate a lot to struggles, unfortunately, and but also I think the struggles are a way in which I understand that there's always positive, in the struggle. If your life has been too perfect, it's hard for me to relate to you, and that's not your fault. It's just that. And by struggles, I don't mean it has to be a very bad. It could be, we all have different struggles, we all go.
Yes.
But just understanding that you went through something which made you doubt, and you really stepped back and asked yourself, or you sought help, or you kind of stepped back a bit and went through, and because the human life is meant to overcome these struggles, not just to celebrate. I love a good celebration. But I love someone telling me about a struggle they overcome, yeah. Great music also. I'll really say music across the board, from African, classical, R&B, music in all its essence. But I think some music now I relate more with is again, storytelling, where there's kind of a story. And yes, once in a while I love the bang bang bang, where you're just having fun.
You have some in the south of France, right?
Yeah, some bang bang bang. Yeah, but sometimes there's that music which touches you, and you're like, oh, someone is saying something. So yeah.
And what is your strength?
You know what? I think optimism.
I think so too.
Yeah. Fuck. I think you have to be optimistic, And I think now, more, because now, I changed industries from something I was very familiar with. And as much as I was familiar with, I think I was reaching the end where I wanted to do other things, but I didn't know how to do them. So when I left my last job, I didn't really do it very well. Because usually what happens is that when you're a researcher, you publish some papers and things like that. And as lovely as my team was, I just did the reports, basic reports. I was meant to write up some scientific papers, which, and I didn't, I just, my head just, I was out. And I think also COVID made me realize that, this is nice, but do you want to do other things with your life? Especially get yourself financially independent, not always looking for the next contract, because academia is lovely when you're young, but as you grow older, depending on who you work for, where you work, and as a foreign researcher, it becomes hard. You're going through so many visas, you're traveling a lot, and the financial rewards are not the best, And I was growing old, but that's no excuse for not doing my job very well. But yeah, so now you asked me that question. So optimism, but the other one is also being okay with laughing at yourself, not taking yourself too seriously, like realizing, oof, I really fucked that up, but not in the sense that you care about it, but you don't let it take away your life, because you live to die another day, you're going to get another chance. So I feel that sometimes people are too hard on themselves, I mean, right now, like in the world, there's really a lot of strife, from, I mean, the war in Gaza to the war in Ukraine. I mean, in Africa, what's very interesting, we've had a lot of these wars, I remember in the 90s, at least each region in Africa had a war, like real war. And actually, right now, as other parts of the world become very insecure, even now with Europe, I mean, a war being very close to continent in Europe and close to a place which has been very, very safe. In Africa, we're relatively, a large part of peace. So you might be going through something bad, some things are really, really bad. But I think once you step back, especially if you as a person, you're not maybe terminally ill, because that's different, or as you're dying, or, a lot of things you will overcome. Mm-hmm. And I feel that now that I'm in a place where people are very privileged, but they don't see it. People really worry about a job review. And I'm like, come on. I mean, that's going to make you like stressed out. I mean, if you have a bad job review, ask yourself, okay, what? I mean, sometimes it's probably because of you. Sometimes maybe it's not because of you, or maybe you have a bad boss. But is that the end of the world? Shouldn't be. So if you look back and ask yourself, am I worse off than a guy who's struggling to enter as an immigrant, or as someone who's in a war zone and really they did nothing wrong. They just happened to be in the wrong country, or am I like the person who's being trafficked, for, whatever reason. So I think when you're in a bubble, in a safe bubble, you kind of, the traffic becomes an issue, and then, the lack of your nice coffee in the shop becomes a problem, when we have bigger problems. So I think for me, optimism, but also being able to step back and laugh at myself. When I screw up, I'm like, shit, I really screwed that up. Laugh about it. If I can ask for forgiveness, I ask for it. If I can't, there are just too many things you can't give a shit about, You have to let them pass. Because also you need to maintain some level of soberness, or a level of because if you worry about everything, then when an actual big thing comes,
it's the end.
Yeah, because you've spent yourself,
Yeah.
So you just have to know, okay, how much should I spend on this? How much mental energy? Because it's coming. Eventually, a big thing is going to come, and you need to be ready. Otherwise, and connected to that, I think in academia where I was, there was a very big issue of mental health.
Oh.
Yeah. Because there's no support,
Yeah.
There's not a lot of support. So people, whether it's students who are doing their PhDs or masters, even in undergraduate school, some kids are students.
I had this experience in my BA, actually, in my training in dance.
Yeah, you see. So at the PhD level, some people have families. I mean, mental health is, even the professors themselves, they can't cope because sometimes you need funding, you don't have the funding, you're being reviewed. So I think stepping away, it's okay, man,
Yeah.
What's the point of getting all these accolades and you run mad?
Exactly. And I feel like also you protect your love for whatever you do.
Yes.
If you just step away for a little bit.
Yeah. And sometimes maybe you never come back.
Yeah.
I think it's, maybe you never come back. And I think it's okay because there's always going to be someone else who'll do it. Because people die every day, the world does not end. So if something is taking you to the brim, step back, reassess. And as you say, sometimes you can step back and come back. But sometimes also you need to be able to let things go. I think that's the hard thing, especially if you're so attached and passionate.
Yeah.
Some people feel that what they have done or who they're with or whatever defines them.
Exactly, defines who they are. And then if they let that go, they're lost.
Yes, they are lost. And we shouldn't ever get into that point. We should be able to appreciate, something and realize that maybe someday I might not have it. If you keep it forever, oof, man, that's great. Good for you, But if you don't, And it's a 50-50 chance, It might go. And sometimes it's not your fault. It's just you need to be able to, assess and say, can I live without it? And if I can, how am I going to,
Good.
Yeah.
You. If you were an animal.
A bird, again. Yeah, I need to be a bird which can soar up and fly places, but also have the overview of the environment. I think I always love when I'm taking off in an airplane, It's always the best feeling because you're going and you can see what's down, and you can't see clearly, but you can imagine, maybe down there there's this, maybe that, So definitely a bird which can fly, not one which
Not a penguin?
Not a penguin. Or a chicken, no.
And what's your favorite color?
So it used to be blue, just because most boys have blue. But I think I like the dark colors now, to be fair. I think between gray and black.
That's the French way.
Is it?
People here, they dress up like dark blue, black.
Well, because it's very, I think I'm also moving. I was always in, when I was back in postgraduate school, I was very, very broke. I went minimalist because, I just didn't have money to buy clothes.
I remember that was in Quimper, right?
Well, hopefully not. That was actually before Quimper.
No, but then in Quimper you told me that you were buying too much, so you were trying to go back to minimalism.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, because in Quimper, I wasn't too broke, but and it's the same thing I'm trying to tell. I was telling you that now I want to go more used, because I don't see any reason to buy new things, especially when it comes to clothes or shoes.
And it's so much better for the planet as well.
It is
because we create way too much clothing.
For sure. Fast fashion.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to so I think because those colors are very interchangeable, and they and also honestly they don't show dirt easily. No, I'm not getting anything white. If I can avoid it. So if I spill my tea on myself, I'm not gonna feel like, but I think I am, one of the two, black or gray.
And do you feel like you know yourself very well?
You know what? I think I now have, I'd say I'm at 70%.
Okay.
Maybe even more. It's one thing to know yourself and not practice what you need to do. I think I'm there. Yeah, no.
I'm a bit there as well.
But I will say, I know what I don't like.
Oh.
Yes. I'm pretty sure. I'm so certain of what I do not want to do. And I think I got to know that during my studies, my graduate studies. I will not tolerate anything which is unempathetic. If anyone is deliberately unempathetic, I will not deal with you. I don't care, because that cuts across what I know what my core values are. Empathy and consideration. Yeah, those are two things I do not. There are times when we're inconsiderate, but unconsciously. It's not because. But if I ever find out that a person is deliberately inconsiderate, I will not work with you, or I will, And I think also forgiveness is something I've learned, where you have to forgive people. You might not deal with them again, but you let it go.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when
you're free then.
Yeah, because when you look at the people who have helped you, forgiven you, unless someone tries to kill you, which someone has not yet. I'm not going to, but even then I'll run away from you and then, forgive you. But so I know who I am, at least in a lot of my core values. And then I think now it's more about moving into practicing the things I need to do. Because I think sometimes we're scared of fulfilling that potential. We always, or at least for me, you always end up doing just less than you really know you can do.
Yeah.
Because maybe you don't know how you'll feel if you actually achieve those big dreams. Maybe you might run mad. But it's a very interesting fear where you want to get there, but for some reason you never.
Yeah, I completely get that.
You never put in that, that real effort, which you think you can, So, but yeah, I think I do know myself, and I think I'm freer to express myself now. That now I've joined a new industry where people expect you to be something, and sometimes I will do it because it's an obligation. Because when you enter a new industry, a new area,
you have to play the game in a way.
Yeah, you have to play the game, but also genuinely, you also want to, when someone suggests something to you, whether it's your boss or a colleague, which is meant to maybe challenge you, you do it. You do it to see, but you understand the concept of maybe why they want you to do it. But there are some times when someone is just trying you for the sake, and you're like, nah, I will not go there. So. Yeah, I think I'm well aware, and also knowing well aware where you want to go.
Okay.
In the broader spectrum, because I think, and that's the problem sometimes when you go into a very competitive big industry, is that people are very laser focused, and when you're not laser focused, people might think you're not, you're not doing your job or whatever, but you're trying to really survey, and then sometimes when you're laser focused, you miss what's happening on the broader side. You need to have, and I think that's what research gives, your background research. It helps you look back and try to put everything together. And a lot of people who are in an industry which is very competitive are very laser focused, and sometimes they lose focus of, what is this whole thing?
The broader picture.
Yeah, the full picture.
Yeah.
And sadly, they might even forget that it's a machine, and because you work so hard trying to solve day-to-day tasks, you never sometimes take the time to reflect on, am I going the right path, or am I just, working like a robot?
Yeah. And if you're yourself now, you could meet your 15 years old self.
Yeah.
Would you say something?
Yes. You know what? 15 years. Yeah. So I really sometimes look back and I'm like, sometimes you have a path and you want to, and then it's sometimes I think it's a bit of luck, and just being in the right place at the right time. But I think I would say keep the drive, because I think I was quite driven. But driven in the sense that make good friends, because I think at all stages in my life, I think I made good friends. So it's made it worthwhile, whether it was primary school, university, South Africa. I met some very nice people, cool people. I learned from them. Yeah, maybe I could have spent my time better. I could have just focused more on individual projects more. Because I remember, when I was in the US, I bought a lot of books, but I never really read them, because I think that knowledge, I could have applied it. So I'm going to go back and read a lot of them, So I think sometimes I know what I need to do, but don't do it. And I'm not usually sure if I'd read that knowledge or if I had done that thing, I'd be, But again, sometimes when I look back, I'm like, maybe it was better I didn't, because sometimes you can go so fast, and then you get overwhelmed.
It's too fast.
Yeah. So I think it has given me time to mature. So yeah, because I think a lot of people who do things in their 20s and 30s, those are super achievers, I think. And super achievers, it can backfire, because you can either get too successful too fast and then you lose drive, or you can just get overwhelmed with all this success, And a lot of us, there's the average people, we really mature with time. And it's okay. It's okay. If your colleague, if your friend, if your brother, if your sister, makes it in their 20s and 30s, that's good, 40s. If you do it in your 50s and 60s, that's also fine,
Yeah.
So I think the comparison, we can learn from each other, but I think I've stopped trying to be too hard for myself and say, maybe emotionally I wasn't ready for that, and it's fine. Yeah, and being okay with that, and also being able to share it with people and say, it's okay. Yeah.
Well, that's a great way to end.
Oh yeah.
Thank you so much for this time.
Thank you for this, Eileen. It's really been amazing. I didn't. Thanks for the offer. And,
very rich episode. I think a lot of teaching also.
Well, I think life is about teaching, right?
It's about teaching.
Yeah. So hopefully it resonates with someone.
I'm sure it will.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
If you enjoy this podcast, please give it a 5 stars on your favorite platform. It really supports me, and then I can interview all the artists of the world until I die. Merci!